Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the final pick'ems of. I mean, it's not really regular season anymore. It's going into the play-ins, but this is the last time we'll be talking about the regular season, or at least matches that like a full week of regular season, I guess. Week 4. I mean, look at these pick'ems. Like, this went really weird. At least when it came to the two teams that really kind of had a lot that they needed to play for, that being Toronto and Florida. Other than that, I mean, most of this week was pretty standard outside of London having a really good performance. This is the first time they've had a really good performance this tournament. And outside of that, I mean, Boston, kind of a bit of a surprise to see them still lose a map to Paris, even though I predicted it to happen. Same with Nixel. I thought they were going to be able to beat Nixel pretty easily. But it is also New York. They are quite a surprising team, I feel. They've definitely had their ups, and it's really sad to not see them be able to play in the play-ins. But they definitely had a great season. Shock, barely able to clutch out the victory against the Spitfire. And then on to Toronto, Florida, and Houston. And man, what I don't understand. I saw both of the Houston matches, or at least like a lot of it. I saw bits and pieces as well. Like, first off, Florida beating Toronto 3-0 is definitely a huge shock. I thought that Florida going into this week was definitely not a great team. Like, I feel like they were definitely like ninth seed for a reason. But after this week, they've clinched 7th. They actually went above the Toronto Defiant by 2 maps. And if Toronto would have 3-0'd Houston, or if they would have taken a map off Florida, they would have had a perfect record. But alas, Toronto was unable to maintain that 0-0, that 0 map differential set 50-50 that they had all season, as they somehow beat Houston 3-1. And they lost to Florida 3-0. Houston is what really surprised me, but I honestly feel like it was the fact that they really weren't carrying, since they were guaranteed 4th seed regardless of how they played. If they beat both Toronto and Florida, that would have just tied them up against the Gladiators. But due to the Gladiators' 2 tournament wins, they would have been higher because of tournament points. Shock clinches 2nd seed due to also again playoff matches and that. So Dallas 1st seed, Shock 2nd seed, followed up by Gladiators, Houston, London. Either London or Atlanta. Those are 5th and 6th. Followed up by Florida, Toronto, Justice, Uprising. And that leads us into the play-ins. They are not going to be on. We're not allowed to do pick'ems for them, but I want to talk about them. To start it off, we have the Boston Uprising and the Florida Man. Florida is a definite question mark. Same with Boston. Really, all of these teams are huge question marks because you don't know what you're going to get from any of these teams. I mean, look at Florida. This tournament, they have done okay, question mark. They haven't been great. Last week, they had a great performance, sweeping the Defiant and only losing a map to the Outlaws. Boston, I mean, they struggled against both Nixel and Paris. But, I mean, if you look at both of these teams' track records, Boston definitely has a better like resume. They've had a lot of really much better matchups than Florida when it comes to like these unfavorable games. And really, it's hard for me to truly say who I think is going to win. I think that this could, both of these matches going into Friday are really hard to predict. But personally, myself, I'm going to give it to the Florida Mayhem in a 3-1. I'm going to give it a 3-1 finish going in the favor of the Florida Mayhem. Mostly based off of the fact that that Boston again is they bench they when they're struggling they struggle, and it's definitely gonna be an upward it's gonna be an uphill battle for the Uprising going into this week into this week. They need to clinch this up against whoever loses Justice Defiant, and I think that if they can get past this second round, I think that they have a good shot of making it to I feel like they have a great shot at making it into the playoffs. That being said, as we go into the second match of the game of the day, the only other match of the day, we have the Washington Justice versus the Toronto Defiant. And again, this is a hard one to predict because, again, Toronto had an awful performance this week against the Mayhem and had a pretty good shot showing against the Houston Outlaws in the same week. Definitely a up in the air matchup because, again, the Justice are another team that has struggled this tournament but has also had really great matchups. This is definitely, honestly, this is the one I'm more excited about. I think this one's a more interesting one. And I think I'm going to go with a bit of a surprising pick. I'm going with the Justice in a map 5. I think that with Decay, Assassin, and Kalios, I think those two are really going to be what kind of carries this team. Like, sure, you have, like, Smurf and... Not Smurf. You have the Toronto Defiant. They're a great team. I think that there's a lot to discuss with them. And I think that there's a lot that could play into Toronto possibly beating the Washington Justice. However, I feel like, again, there's definitely that possibility to see the Defiant lose. And in fact, it could even be a 3-0. Like, Toronto, in order for them to make it to playoffs, they have to stop being so inconsistent. And I think that right now, the Justice are the ones that are looking much stronger going into the play-ins. Even though they did pick up the victory against the Outlaws, they lost in a 3-0 to the Mayhem, and I mean that says a lot in my book. I think that there's definitely a lot more that you need to think about when it comes to the Toronto Defiant than just their 7-7, not 7-7, 11-11, no 12-12. It's 12-12. Their 12-12 record. Like there's so much more that you got to look into. You got to look into the fact that like the Summer Showdown was honestly their meta. That was Toronto's peak, and they played it so well. But they really were mediocre at best in both Mid-Season Madness and Kickoff Clash. And even going into the Contact Cup, it still has been that, and they picked up victories, but that's just because of their ease of schedules. A lot of the times they've been facing off against teams like the Boston Uprising and the Florida Mayhem and the Vancouver Titans and that. So like they've always had a somewhat easy schedule going into these tournaments, and that's what kind of carried them along. Whereas the Justice, they had some great matches. They had some really close ones against teams like the Outlaws and the Shock and the Gladiators. Like the Justice, even though they became this ragtag, group of 5 with a coach as their backup, they've still been able to make it work and make it succeed. And I think that that's where the Justice are really going to pull it through. This happened last time when Justice had one more opportunity to make it work, and they did. They pulled out the Roadhog Zarya, and they were able to make it into playoffs because of it. Unfortunately, there's only one tank, so maybe pulling Decay over onto that Zarya and trying something with Kalios on DPS, maybe? But again, Kalios is also a great Zarya. It really sucks that they got rid of their DPS line outside of Decay and Assassin. I think that right now would be the perfect opportunity to bring Decay onto that tank role. Play that Zarya, but I mean they unfortunately can't right now unless they bring that coach over to DPS, which I don't think it would work. Because I think that this is a matchup that really needs to be talked about and that's going to have a lot of excitement to it. Next up, going into Saturday, I want to talk about the losers first, that being the Boston Uprising versus the Toronto Defiant. I think this is going to be a really exciting match as well. And I mean, everything that I said about the Toronto Defiant applies here. They have to pick it up. They have to find a way to succeed. And this is where a lot of their struggles kind of come into play, is when their backs are against the wall. They have really found a way to struggle. And I mean, if you look at the Summer Showdown, they had that opportunity to make it to the finals and they choked. Boston hasn't had that opportunity. So Boston's looking for blood. Toronto's looking for one more shot. Honestly, I gotta give this to the Boston Uprising. It seems weird, but I mean, again, Toronto, a great team that has had so many internal struggles and just kind of player inconsistencies. I mean, they're still coming off of COVID, of having COVID, so there's definitely that to think of. Along with that, there's also the fact that that Toronto is truly an inconsistent team, and I think that there's a lot that needs to be worked on. And I feel like, given the time, Toronto could beat the Boston Uprising, but personally myself, I want to give the Boston Uprising a map 5 victory over the Toronto Defiant. Mostly for the fact that I really want to see Boston make it to play-ins. I mean, man, I think this is going to be an exciting match, regardless, even if it is just like a 3-0 for the Defiant or whatever. But moving on to the winners round, we have the Justice versus the Mayhem. The winner is going to be going on to the playoffs. And the loser of the match has to go on to face, in my predictions, the Boston Uprising. I mean, again, Florida and Washington, two very inconsistent teams. That is basically the what this Final Four are, is which team can be the least inconsistent. And I mean, Justice, when they have a good day, they have a good day, but usually after that in the week, it's only downhill. And personally myself, I have to say that this is the time that the Justice fall apart. I gotta give it to the Florida Mayhem in a 3-1. I think this is going to be Florida's time to really assert their dominance of these four teams. And I think that going into the play-ins, they're looking a lot stronger, they're looking a lot more structured, they're looking a lot more of a unit like we were seeing in the kickoff clash. This is what we want to see from the Florida Mayhem, and this is what I think we're going to be seeing, a pretty dominant performance by the Mayhem. And even though I'm giving Justice a map, I think that this could easily go into 3-0. Florida is looking a lot better right now. Justice they're still looking pretty decent. I mean, the Justice are a team where you really have to think about what you're doing against them, and this is where that's going to be playing it. The Justice really need to pick up their slack, really need to stick with it, and pull out a victory. But at the same time, Florida is just a superior team, and I think this is easily a Florida Mayhem victory, securing their place in the playoffs, which leads the Washington Justice versus the Boston Uprising to close out the weekend and see who joins Florida in playoffs. I mean, man, this is hard to say. I think I gotta stick with my initial statement. With when the Justice have a good day, the next one's usually pretty bad, and I think that's coming here. I think that the Boston Uprising are gonna clinch their spot in playoffs with a honestly really close map 5 finish. I think it's going to be a scenario similar to the Shock Justice match from Summer Showdown, where it was map 5 on Ilios. Both Shock and Justice had a point, and it was 99-99. I think it's going to be that close. It's going to be, 3-2, 4-5, like stuff like that. Super close matches, and I think that's going to truly be who wants this more. And I honestly got to say it's Boston Uprising. Unfortunately, I don't have Young Bung for it. I'm a huge fan of him on the Boston Uprising, but I think the Boston Uprising are punching their ticket to Anaheim to join the Florida Mayhem in the playoffs in a map 5 finish. And that is all for play-ins. Again, this is a hard one to predict because truly anybody can make it, I think. Like, for all we know, it could be Boston and Washington making it. Like, and that's not even something that, like, you could, like, you can't tell me that that's not possible. Because it is. It's very easily possible. And I think Boston's going to make it. I think Boston and Florida are going to be making it. There's definitely possibility for the Toronto Defiant to make it. Again, it all just depends on how well the Defiant can play. But again, after last week, I'm a bit worried about them. Even though, Florida picked up the victory against Houston as well, they looked really poor against the Mayhem themselves. And again, I also have to say, I honestly feel like the Outlaws sandbagged that match. Both their matches against the Mayhem and the Defiant. And I feel like that says a lot more about Mayhem and Defiant going into the playoffs or even in the play-ins. That even with a team sandbagging the match, they still picked up a victory, a map. Like, there's definitely a possibility that we could see Boston Justice making it. We could easily see Florida Toronto. I feel like Boston's definitely the dark horse going into this. But I would love to see that dark horse succeed and make it to Anaheim for the playoffs. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching the final pick'ems before playoffs. It's been a great journey, an amazing performance from myself and Rudd when it comes to predictions. Not really. Looking at our things, 93 points. These are not good weeks. 8 points and 9 points. I've had some good times. Look at the Summer Showdown. It was definitely a great one. Looking back at all these, I definitely felt like I had a really good grip on this. I'm really frustrated about this one. I feel like I would have done pretty good. But who knows? We still have a lot of Overwatch League left to see. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Have a wonderful day.